The night was quiet, almost too quiet for the small suburban town that prided itself on its sense of safety. People here rarely locked their doors. Neighbors waved as they watered their lawns. It was the kind of place where you knew everyone by name, or at least thought you did. That illusion shattered when police were called to a home just before midnight. The caller was frantic, a neighbor who had noticed the front door left wide open. Inside the home, officers discovered a scene that would haunt the community forever. The victim, a young professional woman, lay motionless in her living room. The house showed no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No pried locks. No clear motive. It was as though the life had been taken and the killer vanished into thin air. For investigators, this was the kind of case that tested patience. No fingerprints. No weapon. No security footage. Nothing except silence. And yet, hidden in the most unlikely of places, was a single clue. Not a bloody glove, not a strand of hair, but a small, almost laughably insignificant scrap of paper, a post-it note. At first, it was brushed aside. After all, sticky notes are everywhere, reminders on fridges, random scribbles on desks. But this one carried something chilling, something that would eventually unlock the entire mystery. The question was, who had written it, and what did it mean? Clues are only powerful if they are recognized. And at this point, no one realized they were staring at the key to solving everything. The sticky note was found crumpled on the edge of the kitchen counter, almost hidden under a stack of unopened mail. On it, scribbled in hurried handwriting, was a single word: tomorrow. It didn't look threatening. It didn't even look suspicious. Just one word: tomorrow. Detectives debated its meaning. Was it a personal reminder? A grocery note? A meeting to attend? Or was it something far darker? When investigators canvassed the neighborhood, they learned that the victim had been anxious in the weeks leading up to her death. Friends recalled her saying she felt watched. She had mentioned being uneasy but couldn't explain why. To them, it sounded like paranoia. To police, it was now a puzzle piece. Could the word tomorrow have been a warning? A countdown? A message left by the victim herself, or by her killer? The post-it note was bagged as evidence, though most detectives didn't think much of it at first. Bigger clues always got more attention: DNA, fingerprints, eyewitness accounts. But as the days dragged on with nothing else to follow, that one scribbled word began to loom larger. And behind it was the chilling thought: tomorrow never came for her. The victim's life was carefully reconstructed by investigators. She was 29 years old, successful, and lived alone. To friends, she seemed grounded, focused, and independent. But diaries recovered from her home told another story. In the weeks before her death, her entries grew scattered and unsettled. She wrote about feeling uneasy when walking home from work, about headlights following her car longer than they should, about hearing faint knocks at her door late at night. Family dismissed it as stress, but detectives began to see a pattern, an escalation. Someone might have been watching her. The post-it note now carried new weight. Was it her reminder of a meeting? Or had someone slipped it into her home, leaving a silent message to toy with her fear? When paired with her diary, the sticky note wasn't random anymore. It was a red flag, and the realization chilled even seasoned investigators. Maybe she knew her end was coming. Leads dried up fast. No forced entry meant she likely knew her killer, or trusted them enough to let them in. That narrowed the list but didn't make things easier. Detectives interviewed co-workers, ex-partners, friends, and family. Each interview painted the same picture: a woman who didn't have enemies. She was kind, quiet, and ambitious. But when the post-it note was shown around, no one recognized the handwriting. No one admitted to writing it. Forensic analysis didn't help either. No fingerprints. No DNA. Just ink on yellow paper. Weeks passed. The case went cold. Media coverage dwindled. For most people, the story faded into another unsolved tragedy. But for one detective, the post-it gnawed at him. A single word couldn't be meaningless, not in a case like this. And he was right. Months later, while reviewing case files, the detective noticed something odd. In one of the victim's work notebooks, her handwriting was neat, organized, almost perfect. The post-it note, however, was scrawled, jagged, rushed. Clearly not her style. If she didn't write it, then who did? The detective began collecting handwriting samples from everyone in her circle: co-workers, friends, acquaintances. At first, nothing matched, until one sample stopped him cold. It wasn't a perfect match, but close enough to raise eyebrows. A man from her past, a former colleague she had once dated briefly before ending things. He had a history of unstable behavior, according to HR records, and had quietly left the company after several incidents. When questioned, he denied ever seeing her recently, denied stepping into her home, denied writing the note. But his nervousness gave him away. The post-it note had finally spoken. Investigators dug into the man's past. His name was Matthew. To outsiders, he seemed ordinary, just another face in the office crowd. But co-workers remembered his temper, his tendency to linger around the victim even after she ended things. His fixation. Digital forensics revealed something chilling. Multiple fake social media accounts traced back to him, accounts that had been silently monitoring the victim. Posts about her work, her favorite cafe, even her gym routine. The tomorrow note suddenly felt like a taunt. Confronted with the evidence, Matthew maintained his innocence. But one detail betrayed him. His handwriting, when rushed, carried the same slant as the post-it note. Experts confirmed it. Probability was extremely high that it was his. Still, handwriting alone wasn't enough to convict. Police needed more. Detectives turned back to the crime scene photos, re-examining every corner. And then they saw it, the victim's cat. Neighbors mentioned that the cat had been locked in the bedroom during the night of the crime. At first, it seemed irrelevant. But investigators realized something. Pets often react violently to intruders. Could the cat have scratched the killer? A medical exam of Matthew Weeks later showed faint scars on his arm. He claimed they were from yard work. But when tested, trace evidence from under the cat's claws matched his DNA. The post-it note wasn't just a clue anymore. It was part of a larger puzzle pointing directly at him. Police devised a strategy. Instead of pushing harder in interviews, they watched him. Surveillance teams tracked his movements, hoping he'd slip. And eventually, he did. Matthew returned to her house late at night, months after the crime, standing across the street as though reliving the moment. He didn't see the unmarked car watching him. When approached, he grew defensive, muttering under his breath about unfinished business. The phrase struck detectives like lightning. Unfinished business. Tomorrow. The pieces were aligning into something darker, an obsession that didn't end even after death. Brought into interrogation, Matthew cracked under pressure, almost. He admitted to writing the post-it note. Claimed it was a message to himself, not to her. He said he had written it months earlier and accidentally left it behind. But he denied the crime. "I didn't touch her," he repeated. "I just wanted her to know I'd always be around." Chilling words. Not an outright confession, but enough to show intent. For prosecutors, it wasn't airtight. But the post-it note had transformed from random paper to psychological evidence of stalking. It told a story his words couldn't erase. The trial began, and the post-it note was displayed before the jury. Just one word, tomorrow. Simple, yet heavy with meaning. Prosecutors argued it was a threat, proof of obsession, and evidence he had been in her home before the crime. Combined with the cat's DNA evidence, surveillance, and his own contradictions, the case grew strong. For the jury, the note became a symbol, a reminder of how even the smallest clue, overlooked by many, could carry the weight of truth. And as the verdict drew near, one thing became clear. Tomorrow had sealed his fate. The courtroom was tense. On one side sat the victim's family, eyes red from grief but burning with determination. On the other sat Matthew, expression unreadable, his hands folded neatly as though this was just another day at work. The prosecution opened strong, presenting the post-it note as more than paper. It was a window into his mind. This wasn't a reminder, the prosecutor said firmly. It was a message, a threat, a sign of control. The defense countered, insisting the note was meaningless. It says one word, tomorrow. That's it. You can't build a murder case on a scribble. But the jury leaned forward, because deep down, they knew words can carry weight far beyond their letters. And this word felt heavy, like a promise unfulfilled. As testimony unfolded, the victim's family took the stand. Her mother recalled late-night phone calls when her daughter said she felt unsafe. Her father described how she had changed routines, trying to shake the feeling someone was following her. Each word cracked the courtroom open with raw emotion. The post-it note wasn't just evidence anymore. It was proof that her fears had been real all along. The defense tried to downplay it, painting her as paranoid, overworked, imagining threats where there were none. But the jury had already seen too much. The note, the cat's scratches, the surveillance. The family's grief turned the post-it into a haunting echo of what was lost. Handwriting experts testified, showing side-by-side comparisons of Matthew's rushed writing with the post-it note. Stroke by stroke, curve by curve, the similarities became undeniable. But what struck the jury wasn't just the science, it was the psychology. The expert explained how stalkers often leave subtle messages, tokens meant only for the victim to understand. To outsiders, they look harmless. To the victim, they are terrifying. Tomorrow, the expert said, isn't just a word. It's a countdown. It's a way of saying, I decide when the end comes. Gasps filled the room. The post-it had transformed into something sinister, an invisible clock ticking down to tragedy. When forensic scientists took the stand, they brought evidence from the unlikeliest source, the victim's cat. Microscopic analysis of skin cells under the animal's claws matched Matthew's DNA. Experts explained how pets often defend their owners, scratching intruders. It was a silent witness, speaking through science. The defense tried to argue contamination, that DNA could have transferred through other means. But the jury saw the truth. He had been inside her home. He had faced resistance. The post-it note had placed him there mentally. The cat's claws placed him there physically. Together, they painted a picture too dark to ignore. The prosecution unveiled Matthew's secret life online. Fake accounts used to monitor the victim's every move. Posts about her cafe visits, gym routines, even what time she turned off her lights. Each screenshot was a gut punch to the jury. This wasn't coincidence. It was obsession. The post-it note now became the final layer of that obsession. Proof he wasn't just watching, but planning. The defense scrambled, claiming harmless interest. But jurors knew the difference between interest and intrusion. And this was predatory. Desperation grew on the defense's side. They argued the post-it note was vague, the DNA inconclusive, the surveillance circumstantial. They painted Matthew as misunderstood, lonely, unfairly demonized. Is it a crime, the lawyer asked, to write down the word tomorrow? But the courtroom wasn't convinced, because in the context of everything else, tomorrow wasn't innocent. It was loaded. The post-it note, once dismissed as irrelevant, had become the cornerstone of the case. And the defense's attempts to erase its meaning only made it stand out more. Deliberations stretched late into the night. Some jurors hesitated. Could one note really link directly to murder? Others pointed to the DNA, the stalking, the surveillance. But ultimately, it was the combination that sealed the verdict. The post-it wasn't the only clue, but it was the clue that tied everything together. Without it, the case might have remained unsolved. With it, the pattern was undeniable. The verdict was read aloud, guilty. The family wept. The town exhaled. Justice, at last, had found its way through the smallest of clues. Matthew was sentenced to life without parole. The post-it note, that tiny scrap of paper once overlooked, had become the most powerful piece of evidence in the trial. The victim's family spoke outside the courthouse, reminding the public that it wasn't just about one word. It was about listening to victims when they say they feel unsafe. She told us, her mother said, and we didn't hear her enough. Don't wait until it's too late to take fear seriously. The case became a lesson nationwide. Never underestimate the smallest detail. Criminal investigators across the country studied the case. It was added to training manuals as an example of how even the most minor evidence can break open a case. A single post-it note, something most of us use casually, became the difference between justice and silence. And the lesson echoed far beyond law enforcement. Always pay attention to the details. Always believe when someone says they feel unsafe. Because sometimes, those whispers of fear are the loudest warnings of all. The story of the post-it note is more than a crime solved. It's about the fragility of life, the weight of obsession, and the haunting truth that evil often hides in plain sight. A single word, tomorrow, reminds us how quickly tomorrow can be stolen. For viewers, this case is a chilling reminder. Always look closer, always listen, and never dismiss the small things. Because in the end, justice was written not in blood, but in ink on a tiny yellow square of paper. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Crime Hub. Each week we uncover chilling cases where the smallest details reveal the darkest truths. What do you think? Was the post-it note a taunt or a desperate warning? Let us know in the comments below.